Happy Friday here, and welcome to another edition of Husker Online Headlines. Sean Callahan, Steve Sipple, pulling a back-to-back Husker Online channel doubleheader here as we had to adjust the schedule a little bit for the traveling.
Yeah.
As we dropped a really good Husker Online show yesterday. If you haven't caught up, you can download it and listen to it, watch it here on the YouTube or podcast channel. But here we are on Friday with Husker Online Headlines, where we go through what we think are the biggest things obviously going on within Husker Nation. And let's start off, Steve Sipple. Headline number one, camp season here in Lincoln is now upon us.
Yep.
Starting today, Nebraska will have a 10-day period where they'll have 7 days of camps. So they will go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday with camps. And then they'll take Wednesday, Thursday off. And then they'll come back in, and it'll be a Friday, Sunday to close it out. So this is the real grind for Matt Rhule and his coaching staff. And for his coaches, they're heavily involved in all these camps. This is not a walk around, pop in and out deal for the coaches. I mean, they work and coach these camps. Matt Rhule is heavily involved. And what are they doing, Steve Sipple? They're trying to find new players.
Yeah, that's the thrust of it. I think there's an ancillary benefit of I think it's really important just to establish football popularity in the state. What am I getting at here, Sean? It's kind of like I'm not saying this is the same exact thing, but Terry Pettit used to have camps, and he kind of laid the groundwork for volleyball becoming very, very popular in this state. A lot of it was just camps. And little girls grew up, in these camps, and then they saw what was happening in Lincoln, and it just kind of caught fire. I'm not saying that Matt Rhule it's already, Nebraska football has long since been established, but I think it's important to reach out, to reach the people. And this is a way to do it. It's not all about prospects, is what I'm saying. It is, a lot of it is, but it's not all about prospects, because every guy that goes to this camp isn't a prospect. Right.
And we've seen the camp model change over the years. It used to be kind of like an overnight deal where, you'd come and stay in the dorms for 2 nights probably and be here 3 days and go through it. Or you could pop in for a prorated 1-day camp. Now all the camps really everywhere are 1 day. There's a few places that continue to do the overnights, but they're car wash camps. They're in and out. You go in, you test, you measure. You go through some county fair individual drills, and then you do one-on-ones. I mean, the format of camps is pretty similar, but you're right. What impresses me now, tonight will be Friday Night Lights Camp 1. Over 300 prospects will be there.
That's a good number, by the way.
I heard this today from somebody. 25 different states will be represented in that camp.
Good. 300 is a good number.
How many other places? I mean, I'm sure like Alabama and Georgia's and these places are like that. But to have 25 different states represented in your first camp, it really tells you the reach Nebraska has. They can draw kids from 25 states in one camp on a Friday night.
Yeah, and some of that's locale, though. I mean, it helps to be centralized. But yeah, that's impressive. And wouldn't you say 300 is an impressive number?
That's about the max.
Okay.
Think about, we were in Houston on Tuesday morning, and it was close to 450. Right. For a skill player only session.
Right. And I would say this, and I hope I'm not.
It was too many.
Yeah. What you saw with a 450 player camp on one field was when they were doing, for instance, pass routes with a quarterback throwing to a receiver. Receivers were waiting in line for 20 minutes
to get one rep.
So they ended up out of the drill, out of this half hour, maybe getting two chances to catch a pass. So there's a lot of standing around is what I'm getting.
And it's tough to, when you only have access to one field,
right,
and everything's going on one field, it's tough. You can only have maybe 6 quarterbacks throwing, three on one side, 3 on the other, and then go from there. But I think that number is the right number, and that's all positions, not just skill only. So tonight's camp will be all positions, a lot of in-state players. I would say that 65% to 70% of the kids there will be in-state kids.
Do you see an offer coming tonight? Is that a fair question?
I think it's just safe to assume yes.
Okay, that's what I figured.
I think Matt Rhule goes into camp saying, look, there's 300 and some kids here tonight from 25 states. We've got to figure out who the players are and make a statement and say, we're going to reward guys that stand out. And we saw it last year with Donovan Jones, Omaha North, Rex Guthrie from Colorado. You go down the line. Several of the guys in their class last year in the month of June were kids that came to these camps and worked out. And I think Matt Rhule, by doing what he did last year, got a lot of people's attention, because especially if you're 2025,
right?
You know, a lot of times people have like, oh, we've turned the page. We're on official visits right now in June. We're ready to shut her down.
Right.
They're not shutting her down for 25. They're still trying to find 25s. Now, 26s and 27s will benefit too. I mean, those are the guys that you hope to find tonight. Right. Get a heads up look at some of those 26s and 27s.
So that stuff is really important. And then, you know what, I'm interested in the postgraduate camp because of,
and that's Tuesday, I believe.
That's Tuesday. There you go. Postgraduate camp is June 10th.
Oh, that's Monday. Sorry, Monday.
Okay. Why? Because you can get a prospect out of there, as Nebraska did with James Williams. And you never know who's going to show up to that.
Luke Longville.
You just never know who's going to show up. And it could be somebody that helps you, or it could be somebody like James Williams, who is starting to become not just someone who helps, just someone you're counting on, you know? So I'm interested in that. I'm obviously 57 years old, so I like the fullback camp because it's sort of a nod to a great time in the program's history.
I've got my questions about fullbacks going forward, though. I felt I felt like it's been somewhat phased out. We didn't really see or hear of the fullback at all this spring.
How much of that is we just didn't see much practice?
Well, in the spring game, I mean, like the fullback has essentially become, you know, a tight end that can, you know, move around. I mean, some of those tight ends can do the fullback things you want. Well, like Janier and Bonner moved back to receiver.
This is where I'd love to have Matt Rhule sitting right here and hear what he says to that. Last spring, remember who got the first carry?
Janier Bonner
from the fullback,
but he's not a fullback anymore.
No, he's a receiver.
Braden Clover, fullback, left the program. I mean, so like
they have Liebentritt though.
Liebentritt is their main guy, and then they brought in a couple freshmen.
Liebentritt is a legit fullback. He's a legit fullback. How much will he be used? I don't know, Sean. It's possible we miss, you know, in those scrimmages. You hear more than I do. But I never heard anything about them.
I was told that it really wasn't much of a part of the spring.
Okay.
And
they're still having a camp. And I think you'll be interested, and I'll be interested to see how many fullbacks are there.
The issue, I think, with fullback is not very many high schools really use them.
That's the thing, yeah.
And so you almost have to project like a guy that would show up that never has played fullback, and you make him a fullback. Like Vince Genatone from North Platte, that's going to come here as a linebacker, Montana transfer, runs a 10.5, and he's 6 foot, 235 pounds, and he's got a 10.6 broad jump or whatever, 10.8. You know, he's a guy like, hey, maybe he could be a fullback.
Think about Vince Genatone in 1993 Nebraska, or let's say 95 Nebraska. I mean, when Tom was using the fullback a lot.
Well, like Tom Rathman wasn't he a really good wrestler? I know he's a good track runner.
Yeah, I don't know about wrestling. He might have been. But Genatone, I've seen enough of Genatone to say wouldn't he have looked perfect in those old offenses, right? I mean, he would have been a dude.
Oh, no doubt.
Yeah. As a fullback, as a Makovic, as a Schuster, you can go back to the 80s in this discussion.
I always liked Lance Lewis.
Lance Lewis was a great one. Carpenter was a great one.
Carpenter was a tight end.
No, you're thinking of Tim Carpenter. Oh. I'm thinking about the other Carpenter.
You know who else was a fullback? My old coach, Tim Yonk.
Tim Yonk was a great fullback from Schuyler. I'm blanking on the Carpenter fullback. He was from Kansas. I'm not thinking of your friend, the tight end Carpenter. I'm thinking of the fullback Carpenter. I'm just blanking out on his
name. Obviously the Makovickas and Schlesinger and Schuster.
Yeah. Genatone's that guy. And maybe some kid has a dream like that. I don't know.
I think the way you only play a fullback is if you have an advantage. Like, you don't just put an 11th man on the field to say you have a fullback. It's got to create an advantage. It's like basketball. You're not going to put a fifth guy out there that hurts your team.
No.
And football is the same way. If you put a fullback out there, you're going to try to create an advantage, whether it's as a blocker, a receiver, or whatever you want to do with them. And if they have that kind of athlete, I'm sure Matt Rhule will find a way to use them.
There you go. So tonight starts it off, Friday Night Lights camp. We don't know exactly who will be there, but you foresee an offer.
I think so. I mean, I just think it's safe to say, but this is a big stretch, 5 straight days of camps.
Yeah, it means a lot of work for a lot of people.
I told my wife, I'm like, I'll be gone every day. So.
That's a lot of work for a lot of people over there. Not just the coaches. But I guarantee you this. They will be well-run camps.
And they're built around official visits. So if you notice, Nebraska is not going to have a big visit weekend this weekend. The focus this weekend is camps.
Okay, interesting. See, that will be well run. And I'm not one part of Frost's regime that I thought was fine. I thought the camps were pretty well run. Your thoughts?
Yeah,
I thought they were.
Oh, the Frost regime?
Yeah.
I mean, they've all kind of followed the same model. I mean, the Friday Night Lights, Mike Riley came up with that concept.
And
it's been very successful.
Yeah. Riley ran good camps. Nebraska's run good camps. Rhule will keep running them and maybe take them to another level.
All right, before we take it to headline number 2, HuskerOnline headlines brought to you by Omaha Steaks. With Father's Day right around the corner, what do you give the man who has everything? Easy. You give him an experience he'll never forget. You give him Omaha Steaks, because a world-class dad deserves a world-class steak. The Father's Day experts at Omaha Steaks have made it easy to put a smile on the big guy's face this summer with hand-selected gift packages starting at just $89. Just go to omahasteaks.com and use that promo code HuskerOnline at checkout for an additional discount when you shop the gourmet gift packages for Father's Day. With Omaha Steaks, the possibilities are endless flavor, endless variety, and endless value. Truly, they have perfected more than the steak, and your dad is guaranteed to love every bite. Pick from the premium proteins like juicy pork chops, air-chilled chicken, and beefy burgers. Go to omahasteaks.com. Use that promo code HuskerOnline to get these exclusive savings. Shop for unforgettable gifts that are guaranteed to make Dad's day, because if there's one thing Omaha Steaks knows, it's Dad's one steak. That's omahasteaks.com. Promo code HuskerOnline at checkout to get these exclusive packages starting at just $89. Okay, headline number 2. Sip, we were in Texas this week, and it's safe to say the biggest story that emerged out of the camps in Belton, Texas, and Houston was the addition of offensive lineman David Hufken out of Germany, a 22-year-old. And David was at these camps with a nonprofit group called Gridiron Imports. And what they do is they help and work with international prospects and get them to camps, get them the exposure they need to get recruited. Well, we're pleased to welcome on here to Husker the Headlines, Chris Adamson, who is the director and one of the owners here of Gridiron Imports. And he was instrumental in getting David Hufken back into the game of football over the last 9 months, which ultimately led to his commitment. Chris, it's great to see you again. We really enjoyed this week getting a chance to get to know you out in Texas.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's great to see you guys again.
Chris, how often do you see something like this happen? I mean, this was, now we've been portraying it as sort of a unique occurrence that, this 6'7", 260-pound German player shows up at a camp. Nebraska had no idea who he was, saw him, and was immediately intrigued. And it results in a scholarship offer. How unique is it in your mind?
It's a unique situation and a unique story. I mean, we've had a number of players over the years go from Europe to Division I college football, to high-level college football, but none who have been as far off the radar screen for those major programs as he was, and then suddenly, vaulted into an incredible opportunity. So he is unique. I mean, we've had guys make the jump each summer, but most of those had a little bit more. They're a little bit more well known here. There's a little bit more lead up in the recruiting than there was for him.
Chris, how have you seen David's body develop in the time he's out of the game? I mean, has he always been this put together, or has he made physical gains in the years out of the game?
I mean, he's definitely made some physical gains in terms of his overall, strength and physique. He's worked really hard, especially over the last year to get back into kind of high level football shape. But he's someone who, when we first met him when he was 17 years old, he was darn near 6'7". He was 6'6", 6'7", had a great frame, had a kind of an uncanny ability to get off blocks, to bend. He wasn't quite the athlete he is right now, but he was 17, 18 years old. But he's always been an impressive, kind of startlingly impressive athletic kid that did things that 6'7" guys couldn't normally do.
Chris Adamson joins us. Now, here's the deal. Here's some background on Chris. I don't think he'll mind me sharing it. Chris played offensive line for Dartmouth. He's highly familiar with the position and what it takes. So he sees it with a keener eye than, for instance, I do. So what else do you see about him that leads you to believe, I think he can play tackle at the college level like you did?
Yeah. David has the opportunity to be a plus level athlete at that position. The feet he has, the speed he has, the ability to redirect, and as the game has gotten so much more spread out and fast on the defensive side of the ball, especially the speed on the defense. I think he is in many ways the prototypical offensive tackle. He's not going to be a 330-pound, load at one side or the other, but he's going to be able to move his feet and get in front of, any speed rusher you put out there in front of him. I think that's the length he has is incredible, and in the feet and the redirection ability he has. I think he can learn the rest. I think he can put some weight. The more weight on, he can add some more technique in the run game. But in terms of just pure athlete, I think he's going to be able to do it on the edge.
Chris, what have the last few days been like for you and your organization and David? Obviously, there's a lot of things going on to get him back to Nebraska to start his career, but have you had other coaches and other schools say, hey, wait a minute, we might want to take a look at David Hoofkin too?
Yeah. The phone's been ringing the last few days, and we have 48 kids here in total we're working with. So there's a lot going on, multiple camps every day in different parts of Texas. But yes, there are other schools that are reaching out and asking about him and offering him and things like that. So it's been a whirlwind, I think, for all of us, not just him. We're more experienced with this situation than he is, but it's still the way this thing has just kind of exploded in a matter of just a couple of days has been something that we've all had to kind of adjust and work around and work through.
Can you say who some of those schools are, or is it something that he's not really going to make public at this point?
Well, he had the offers prior to Nebraska from North Texas and then Division II West Texas. And there's if he wants to make those schools public, I'll let him make those schools public. I don't want to, I guess, break news on, or whatever on his, instead of him. If he wants to share that information, right. I'll let him do that.
It seems, Chris, like his reaction, which we're seeing right now to Nebraska offering, is such that I would think he's pretty committed. You know how the world works, the recruiting world. You have a son who plays quarterback at a high level. Does it feel like a firm commitment to you?
It does. Yeah, he's very excited. He knows what it means to be offered by Nebraska. Me as an Oklahoma guy, I consider Nebraska a football blue blood. And so both of us were blown away by by just the fact that it happened. And even though I kind of knew it might be coming, but he is committed. Like he's a very straightforward, honest, genuine young man. He is incredibly appreciative of this interest and opportunity and the other just interest he's getting from other schools. But we literally came into this week with, we just need to find you a school to get here in the States and get playing. And never imagined it would be Nebraska.
Chris, when we talked Tuesday night, obviously you're like, hey, we got a lot of work to do just to get the next balls rolling for him. Where's that process at
Yeah.
in terms of the visa and getting to Nebraska.
Yeah, David had done a really good job. That's one of the things that we were working on, for the past 6-7 months, was getting his NCAA eligibility stuff in line, and he's done a really good job with that. There are a couple of things that are missing that were sent by his school that just haven't gotten processed. So we're trying to track those down, have those resent. But he's really close to having everything in that's needed. So we've been working on that, trying to get in touch with people in Germany early in the morning here, getting things sent, resent to the NCAA. But honestly, a lot of what they have is the stuff that actually takes a long time to get. The stuff they don't have right now is a quick fix type stuff. So we're really close to having it all done. But then from there, there's a visa process that will have to happen after he's accepted at the University of Nebraska. That will take 2 to 4 weeks probably once he's accepted, just because as the wheels of government work, it's a federal, U.S. federal institution, so it's not something that we can speed up too much, but we will have the ability to help expedite that appointment a little bit.
Gridiron imports is something that a lot of people aren't familiar with. How the question I get from people is, how many prospects do you have? I mean, how many schools are you hearing from? Just besides David, how many other prospects would you have right now?
Yeah, I think actively we have between 30 and 40 players in the U.S. at a time each year. Overlapping at times too. We've had about 300 players come to the U.S. over the last 7 years between the boarding high schools, the junior colleges, the colleges. So we have a lot of guys, but we have probably between 4 and 7 Division I prospects a year. Some like David are coming straight from Europe, and most are here in the States.
Okay,
Chris, you guys are in Dallas, and talking to you more about that, it made a lot of sense with the international airport and then the access from Dallas to a lot of different schools. Give our viewers and listeners an idea of just like what type of schedule you're on in terms of the camps that you've already hit, and then the ones that your group will hit later this month.
Yeah. So we all arrived on the 30th of May and came out of the gates with the SMU Dallas showcase and the DFW showcase at TCU the first 2 days. So it was pretty easy travel. We stayed near the airport, right around the highway to Embassy Suites. So we have a little space. We have breakfast every day. It's a good spot for us. So we came out of the gates, camps back to back the first 2 days. We usually try to schedule an off day of some sort every 3 to 4 days. So we had that off day before we came out to Mary Hardin Baylor, where we first met the Huskers coaches and others, and then we followed that up with a trip to Houston. So some days it's an easy trip. It's a 30-minute to a 2-hour trip. Other days, we were in Houston yesterday. We were in Houston 2 days before that. It's about a 4.5-hour trip each way. But we just based on how many guys we had, we're a traveling party of about 60 between our media, between our creative, their media stuff for us, pictures, and our coaches and our drivers and our players. We just can't move our bags from city to city. Like we'd literally need a U-Haul, a massive moving truck to follow us around everywhere. So it works out pretty well to be in Dallas for the most part. There are a couple of ugly days of long days, 4 o'clock wake up and midnight return kind of days. But but they only get one shot at this, right? And it costs them a lot to get here. By the time they fly, you can't. There's no such thing as cheap international flights these days. So by the time they get themselves here, they want to take advantage of every moment. So a lot of times we're telling them, no, you should probably sit this particular camp out because you've done 5 days in a row. Maybe you need to take a break so you can go the next 5 days. So it's they're eager and they are highly motivated. And just being with them in the hotel, we haven't had a single issue in a hotel in 6 years. Like they're awesome. They're so focused. They're so mature. They know why they're here. And it's honestly it's a pretty, other than the grind of the travel, it's a pretty relaxing week for me. That I just do my job. I don't have to worry about babysitting.
I'm guessing you're going to have more and more coaches calling you, Chris, and say, "Hey, would you guys consider coming here?" And I'm sure you already are getting those phone calls right now.
Yeah. Well, yes, that is certainly happening. And as the guy with the American number as opposed to the international number, most of those calls are coming through me first. The first question that I always say to David, like, or the first comment to David I have is, if you were from Oklahoma, you wouldn't go to school X over Nebraska. So I like trying to at least give him that context. I want him to talk and hear things and understand what the opportunities are, but he may not have the depth of knowledge of the whole landscape of college football, and historically especially, and also currently. So I try to give him that without making decisions for him.
Well, hey, Chris, we really appreciate you taking a few minutes here during your lunch break, joining us here in Dallas, and looking forward to hopefully seeing David up here very soon.
Yeah. Thank you guys very much. It was awesome to meet you guys down here in Texas, and hopefully David's up there with you guys ASAP.
I want to see you every year in Belton, Houston. Hopefully when we make these camp trips, we'll see each other every year from here on out.
It'd be awesome. Let's make it a tradition.
Yeah. I really appreciate what you're doing. Just as a football fan, it's a neat thing that you're doing.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's a labor of love sometimes. Love of the game and love of guys who love football as much as we do.
Right.
Well, thank you again to Chris Adamson for joining us on Husker Online Headlines. Before we take it to headline number 3, wow. I mean, what a service that they're providing these guys. Yeah, unbelievable.
It's a great service. And you can tell just from talking to him that it's a lot. I mean, there's a lot involved, the travel, all these people that have to travel together. The hours are long. But I'll tell you, he said something right at the end there that struck me, and you could see it. You watched David Huffkin. You watched him in action. We both did. You can tell the one thing we hadn't even really mentioned much is he loves the game. You can see it. I mean, you could actually see it in his reaction to that scholarship offer. But if you watched him go through drills, he was very intentional. And he really wants to be a good football player. It's very obvious. That's another part of the package that you can't underestimate that. That's an important part. The want-to factor is gigantic, and he has it.
Well, and just the desire it takes to want to get up every morning and make those trips. I mean, you're going from Dallas to Belton back to Dallas.
Right.
Then you're going to go Dallas to Houston back to Dallas. And I mean, Houston to Dallas, a lot of people fly that trip.
It's a hard trip.
I've done it once.
Right. It's a hard
trip. And I'm like, man, this is a hard drive.
These kids, it's not just David. I mean, you saw other ones. They love it. And they're doing this for a reason. And I really, like I said to Chris, I just appreciate what he's doing.
20-hour days, 4 a.m. wake up call, midnight, get back.
Yeah, Chris is an accomplished player. I mean, he started for Dartmouth. I think he's a multi-year starter for an Ivy League school. And his son is a 2025 Georgia Tech quarterback commit, Grady. So, yeah, like you said, I hope we run into them again next year. That'd be great.
That'd be cool. Yeah. It was funny. I asked Brian, one of the other directors there from Europe. I go, where do you guys go to eat? How do you get stuff? Yeah. He goes, we just go to Buc-ee's.
Is that right? Is that right?
Yeah. Buc-ee's is like the answer to all questions when you're traveling through Texas.
Yeah, it is. You can get a lot there. Well, it's a one-stop shopper. I should have gotten a bag there, but anyway, yeah. All right. That was good. Thank you, Sean.
Let's take it to headline number 3 here on Husker Online Headlines. Let me go back to my notes. I already lost track of what our headline 3 was.
OTA workouts.
OTA workouts. Okay. Headline number 3, OTA workouts begin in Lincoln. And I think this terminology is probably new to a lot of Husker fans because they're like, OTA. Well, recently, over the last 5-6 years, NCAA has allowed it where coaches get more time with the players to coach. Mm-hmm. And so they get 2 1-hour practices a week that are an hour long. But I mean, when I say hour, it's a full hour wall to wall where they run through drills and the coaches are involved in those. And those began this past week.
Yeah. And they're critical. I mean, I was talking to Garrett McGuire, just we're talking on the field at the camp at Houston Christian, and the conversation wound around to the current receivers. And, Sean, guys are going to be vying for spots. And he said, well, a lot of what happens in the fall will be determined June, July, August. And it got my attention. Why? Why did it get my attention? Because a lot of people look at this time of year and say, not much going on, right, Sip? Now, they might say this now. In this day and age, people might say, not much going on in the program, but recruiting, right? No. Here's the thing that people forget. It's interesting about college football, and I have to remind myself, I forget. There's a whole team there that doesn't care about what's going to happen so much in 2028 with the players they're recruiting. They want to win now, and the process of winning now involves practicing right now. They're not off. You mentioned it, Tuesdays and Thursdays, OTAs. Garrett McGuire is watching his guys closely during this period, and guys can make a move. I mean, we kind of realized that a couple of years ago when we were doing all those player interviews in the summer. And, I got the sense during those interviews, guys can kind of make a move this time of year, a depth chart move, which is never, back in the 90s, early 2000s, we didn't really think that way. Right.
Well, you just thought about the weightlifting and just the conditioning running.
Right.
And then there would be some 7-on-7.
Yeah.
But when Nebraska was running the option, 7-on-7 wasn't a big.
I just think it's more monitored now.
Structured,
monitored. The coaches know what's going on. And maybe a better way to put it is if you're a player who's, maybe a first team guy, but you're slacking in June and July, maybe the best way to put it is that guy could slide out of number one, on the depth chart, or you could slide back from wherever you are in the depth chart if you don't come to work engaged in June and July. And then, of course, camp is August. The preseason camp will start around that 1st of August, right? Or maybe the last week of July. But, yeah, it's on. It's on right now.
And right now you get 8 hours of organized time a week. And so 2 of those are two of these are the OTAs. And then the rest of the time is weightlifting, running, and conditioning, and then meetings.
Mm-hmm.
They can have meetings and film room breakdowns too. But it's when you say 8 hours,
pushed.
It's I would say, when you say when you get there early and you stay late on your own, it's a lot more than, as it's a lot more than 8 hours.
Yeah.
But the quote organized time is 8 hours.
So yeah, I think the reason you brought it up, the reason we're bringing it up, is because they started on Tuesday,
and there's 14 of them.
Yeah, so they go Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it started Tuesday. And Garrett McGuire said, "I'm anxious to get back, and see how the guys are doing. Get back from Texas." So these coaches, it's a fascinating world to me that they exist in. Because we go to Texas and we're all about prospects. We're asking them about prospects. They're also managing their own guys, and that their own guys that are going to help Nebraska in 2024. So it's a colossal job they have. Well, they're always looking. They got to be kind of looking forward, but also they have to win. When I say, hey, have to win, I don't mean jobs are on the line. You know what I mean? It's just, it's college football. It's a bottom line business. Again, I'm not suggesting that this is not a year where they're under the gun or anything like that, but they know the score. They know the deal.
Well, and here's the deal too. Like after the dead period hits on June 23rd, the coaches do go away. So the only time they're a part of these OTAs
is
now. And then they get a break. They need a break.
Yeah, they'll get a break. But man, even then,
you're still checking in.
Yeah, Marcus Satterfield just said to me unequivocally, he goes, "Oh, you're never away completely."
It's just like, our job's similar.
Yeah.
If you're really in this job like we are, there's no break. Now, there's some people in our business that get away, but we can't.
No.
Like if we miss a story, we hear about it.
Yeah, I hear about it.
I hear it from our users. So our job.
Yeah, our bosses and essentially our clientele.
Like if we don't report on something or stay on top of something, we hear about it from thousands of Husker fans. Right. So like that's our motivation. There's some people that can get away at taking. We don't really get away, and we do get away. I'm working still.
It's pretty good.
But I love it. I love what we do.
That's good motivation. Good motivation.
Headline 4. Before we get to that, Husker Online headlines. We got a great deal on Husker Online right now. We're going to give you 2 months of access for $1. Simply use that promo code NU1 at checkout to get 2 months of access for $1. It's the best deal you're going to get at Husker Online. Okay. Headline 4. Troy Dannon, made some comments 7 weeks ago, so almost 2 months ago, at an 1890 event at Pinnacle Bank Arena. It was a private event for donors of 1890, and the video was posted on the 1890 YouTube channel mistakenly and then pulled down. And I think it raised a lot of alarm bells and questions about things, but a lot has actually changed since that video was published. I mean, we kind of now know a little bit more of the direction things are heading with NIL. And, he made the comment that collectives may not be around. I still think there is going to be a place for collectives moving forward. So I think that video was confusing because it was 2 months ago. Well, 2 months ago to now, a lot has actually changed in NIL.
What were the concerns?
Oh, and then the money. So Nebraska, he made a comment that Nebraska pays their roster under 10 million. At Washington, they paid 10 million.
Okay.
And then there's teams that pay over 20. And, I think a lot of Husker fans were, didn't like hearing that. But the reality is that did Nebraska, in your opinion, have a roster that was worth $20 million?
No, not right now.
So I think it's growing by the day with what they're doing in NIL. But in order to have a roster that you pay $20 million to, it's got to be worth $20 million. Like how many, I'll ask you this, how many rosters with Nebraska's talent level paid out around $10 million and only won 5 games?
Not many,
if any.
Right. So you're right. Nebraska doesn't have a $20 million roster. So people are going to say, well, who does? Ohio State does. Oregon. Yeah, probably. Yeah. Oregon, but
Texas,
not many. Not many. Georgia, Alabama. I don't know how they're paying players. I mean, these are difficult conversations because we don't know what other people are paying, but we don't know what everybody's paying. USC, I can bring them up as an example because I just talked to one of their writers, the On3 writers, Scott Schrader. Yeah. And he said that USC's pot for football is around 12 million. So I'd say that's right. That's pretty on par with Nebraska, right?
Yeah,
pretty close.
I think once they've added Dylan Raiola,
right,
we've seen things really grow. And getting Jamal Banks, Isaiah Naylor, some of these transfers they've added, they weren't cheap.
No,
to get here. And I think over the last year, they've really only been beat on guys that they're in on a few times. I mean, Brandon Baker is a good example of a guy like if. The rumor was that Texas gave him a 3-year guaranteed deal of $800,000 per year.
Okay.
Guaranteed $2.4 million.
Sometimes a school just doesn't want to pay that.
Do you want to pay a 6'4" offensive tackle that much?
I don't know.
And a guy that's not going to play in year 1.
Yeah.
And so I think those are some of the money was there on those types of situations, like Carlon Jones. I think Nebraska could have upped the ante and kept him over USC. But they made the decision, I think, to move on.
Right. There's programs out there because I talked to other writers that have regrets about paying players like last year, and then those players really didn't pan out at all. Then there's a regret. There's I guess you were calling it buyer's remorse.
Then you're stuck.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, most NIL deals are generally 1 year.
Right. So, but there's even if you if you pay a kid for 6 figures 1 year and he doesn't pan out, that's just a waste of money.
Well, then you give him a haircut and they don't usually respond very well.
Right. So these numbers, I know they're confusing to people because they're all over the map. I mentioned USC at 12 million. UCLA, there were published reports that with Chip Kelly in charge, their NIL for football was less than $1 million. It was in the $880,000 range. Which I would say to that, you can't win that way. I mean, there's
UCLA.
Yeah. What did I say?
USC.
Yeah, I'm sorry. USC was in the 12 million range. UCLA under Chip Kelly was under $1 million. I don't know how you win that way.
Well, and people also forget the interference that Trev Alberts has caused with NIL here the last 3 years.
How so, Sean?
Well, let's start at the very beginning. I mean, Nebraska did launch one of the very first collectives in college football, ABM.
It was absolutely one of the first, and definitely
you couldn't have started one any earlier.
No, it was, I hope people understand this. It was maybe the most elaborate. Nebraska came out of the gate, thanks to Jared Lambrecht, with an elaborate enterprise.
They created a service contract agreement that everybody uses now.
Yeah, it wasn't just a mom and pop. We don't know what we're doing. We're flying by the seat of our pants. No, it was not that at all. It was Nebraska's, much like Boyd Epley was on the forefront in the weightlifting area. Nebraska was on the cutting edge in NIL. It was. That's the only way to say it. Give Frost organization credit on that.
I mean, the O'Shawn Mathis and he was a draft pick.
Yeah.
Trey Palmer.
Yeah.
You don't get guys like that at that point. And I think the awkwardness was that Trev Alberts really didn't want to keep Scott Frost.
Right.
So, he wasn't going to support or help it, and instead cause a lot of interference, having compliance, sniffing around what they're doing, and just not really being, it was such a new territory.
And then continued to sort of cause interference.
And then what happened was NIL, that when Frost was fired, ABM ended.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, Trev Alberts announced he was going to start a collective, the Big Red, or support a collective, the Big Red Collaborative. That was the first time he had publicly supported it. Announced some guys that were going to run it. Well, then a week later, the Pede family, the largest boosters of the program, said, we're going to have Matt Davison run 1890. And then that's kind of what led to even more confusion, because when your largest booster of the program is going to do what the Peds are doing, at that point, Albert says, this is great. Like, we don't even need to do this anymore. But he dug in and operated, even as of last year, 2 collectives.
Yeah.
But the other collective never really operated. But I remember writing this last July, like, they had a guy on the radio for Husker Sports Network talking about NIL in Nebraska, and he kept saying 2 collectives.
Yeah.
And
there wasn't 2 collectives.
And the interference and confusion that caused, and even just not directing donor dollars to 1890 hurt Nebraska.
Yeah.
Now you're seeing Troy Dannon saying, if you're going to give money to us right now, don't give it to us. Give it to 1890.
Yeah, and Troy Dannon wears 1890 gear. I mean, it's such a different look. I mean, I don't know what to say about Trev. I don't know.
Trev wouldn't sit in a meeting with Matt Davis in 1890.
Right.
Like, so it's just like, these are the people trying to help pay your athletes.
Right. I guess the best way to put it, and I don't mind doing this, because I think, and people are going to be saying, well, where was all this?
We talked about it.
We've talked about
it. Don't say we have.
Easy.
No, it just really bothers me.
Right,
like,
I know.
we have, and everyone yelled at us for trying to tell the truth about it.
Right. The bottom line is, I think the most polite way to put it was 1890 thrived despite the AD.
Massive interference.
Yeah. They had to, it caused a lot of stress for 1890. They had to push forward, raise money kind of despite the AD. And that I kept saying, and this is not the first time I've said this, that's vintage Nebraska to me. Nebraska, the infighting just tires me out. And I don't think it's happening now at all. But it happened a lot over the years, going back to the early 2000s. The infighting drove me nuts. And here it was again. Here we are again, Nebraska infighting. Great. It's so hard for Nebraska to win because, there's some natural challenges that they face, mainly geographic. And then when you have that infighting, it just makes it that much more difficult. So, but you know what? Don't got to talk about it now. And don't have to talk about it now, Sean, because that's over.
Yeah, since April or March, I mean, it's been a whole different direction.
A cloud lifted over 1890. Is that overstating matters?
I mean, Matt Rhule.
Was that overstating matters?
Matt Rhule could have been, and other coaches would never really talk too much publicly about it. If they did, it was like a quick blurt.
Yeah. They had to be careful.
They couldn't wear the gear. They were told. So it was just an odd behavior. And, I've talked to people at On3 in the NIL world that I work around, and they asked, what's the collective like there? And I told them, you got this family here that has basically backed the whole thing. They pay all the office. They built a multi-million-dollar office setup. Mm-hmm. They pay all the staffing. staffing. If you give a donation, 100% goes to the players. They
legal, accounting, all of that.
And they're like, this is unheard of. Like, there's no other
Right.
thing in the country that's doing this.
Right.
Why? I'm just a dumb bohunk from South Omaha, but why the hell would you get in the way of that?
I don't know.
I took a Dana Altman line there, by the way.
Right. That's fine. I don't. Again,
Like, why would you get in the way of that? If I said, Steve, we're gonna take care of this and pay for everything,
I don't know.
and try to help you
Mhm.
do your job, why would you ever try to like delay that?
It was.
And anyone you talk to outside of Nebraska, when you explain it to them, would say the same thing.
Right. Nebraska has the equivalent of T. Boone Pickens that was willing and able. I mean, willing and able to take this massive duty on. I mean, this massive thing where they can supply the legal and the accounting and everything, the support structure needed, and do it on their dime. They do it. They pay for all that. They pay for the support structure. And that's very rare. And I know me and you had many discussions about that, just how perplexed we were that, first of all, that people were kind of questioning, does Nebraska have a strong NIL? I just couldn't say enough. Yeah. Yes.
Well, and
I always would say, if there's something that holds back Nebraska, it won't be NIL. It won't be. That's not going to be ever the problem.
Well, and I think was this confusion that 1890 like calls the shots on players.
Oh, good God.
Come on. I mean, how I would explain it is they would follow the vision of the coaches they're working with.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like 1890 was out offering guys deals on their own.
Mm-hmm.
They follow a vision of what the athletic department or the coaches want to follow. Yeah. So
Nebraska's on very solid ground in that part, in that realm, the NIL realm. It will not hold back Nebraska. That's not what will, if something is not right, it'll be something other than that.
And really it's a 2-year period now to get to the next phase, which is the 22 million in-house.
It's moving in-house, the payment. But just to drive home this so people understand, there still will be collectives. They will operate above that $22 million threshold. And supply, I guess the way I envision it is the high-end players will be the ones benefiting from the collectives in that setup.
Yeah, and NIL, Shannon Terry kind of dubbed this term, On3's director and owner. NIL has morphed into more of a roster value. And so instead of like true Caitlin Clark type NIL for State Farm Insurance,
it's not what we're talking about.
You get a roster value,
mm-hmm.
like an incoming player that doesn't have much of a pedigree, like just a standard guy might get $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
He's assigned roster,
and that's your roster value deal.
Right.
That is basically what NIL has become.
Yeah.
And I think this 20 million is essentially going to become a roster value type pot. I don't know.
We don't know how it's going to be disseminated. That's
to the other
question.
sport. Like,
well, I'm talking about even on how it's going to be disseminated within the football program. You don't really know that. Is it all going to be equal, or are some players getting more than others?
Well, like baseball, like how do you do sports like that?
I don't know. I'm going to go back to football. Sean, are some players going to be making much more than others under the next setup? That's the question I have.
Well, then, yeah, can you create a way based on your experience, based on if you started, I don't know. Is there going to be kind of like
I don't know,
a chart? I mean,
right.
But if you do that, there's always going to be controversy.
Yeah.
Because a coach might purposely not put a guy at a certain point.
It's still going to be, it's still going to be flawed, but that's the next.
Yeah. There's lots of questions even about the roster sizes of college football and if they're going to limit those. And a lot of that's because of NIL, because the good programs with this full 22 million will essentially be able to have 120 scholarship players if they wanted to.
Yep.
All right. Before we take it to headline 5 again, if you're not a member of HuskerOnline.com, check us out. We got a great deal in promo right now. Get 2 months of access for $1. Use promo code NU1 at checkout to get 2 months for $1. All right. Headline 5. This got my attention, Sip. Ohio State, their first 4 practices, they're going to sell 750 tickets a practice for $50 a piece. Mm-hmm. And the money, staying on the subject of NIL, is going to go to their collective. So assuming they will sell out, which I'm sure they will, they'll make $150,000 for their collective by allowing fans to watch practice.
Yeah, they're raising money for their players essentially. And what one distinction to make here is it's not the Ohio State athletic department that's doing this.
It's the collective.
It's the collective. It's like 1890 doing it, but obviously the athletic department and the coach have to sign off on it. So yeah, this money's going to their NIL pot to pay players. It's just one shot of revenue, but it's a shot. And that's the challenge. See, this is interesting. You think about Troy Dannon and what he has said and what Trev Alberts had said, that you have to think creatively.
There you go. There you go, Columbus.
Yeah. We've been talking a lot, Sean. Creatively. You have to think creatively. Somebody had this idea, and it took, and it makes sense. Because what'd you figure out they're going to raise from this?
150,000.
Yeah, 150,000. That's pretty good. That's a good shot.
Now, could a place like Illinois do this?
I don't know.
No,
probably not.
Wisconsin would have a hard time.
Nebraska would not have a hard time.
No, and would Matt Rhule get on board with this?
I don't know.
I mean, they let a lot of people into practice already.
They do.
Between the former players, the high school coaches, the parents,
people with connections,
the boosters.
I mean, they do. And if you talk to a coach, they would tell you the first 4 practices of August, not even in pads,
pretty elementary,
pretty vanilla. Yeah, you're not unveiling a lot that would matter to an opponent. So it's pretty safe that way. Nebraska could do it. I think I'll tell you one thing that would help it sell tickets, as you know, it's Dylan Raiola, right? And that's where I get very supportive of paying the student athletes, because what do we say it all the time, like, oh yeah, people would pay to see Dylan. Well, why doesn't Dylan get a little shot of that? Well, he is now, a little shot of that money. But a lot of it, if it's a $50 ticket that a Nebraska fan has to buy to a practice, let's face it, a lot of it is just to see Dylan, right?
Well, and I think the business sense of that is, all right, we're getting you in for 50, but we're going to have a presentation, a lunch. We're going to talk more about the collective.
There's that too.
More people.
Yeah.
And then that $50, we're going to turn that into 5,000.
Right.
I mean, it's kind of like a business play too. I mean,
it is.
Like, we're terrible example, but like going to like one of those timeshare things where like, hey, we're going to give you a free lunch and free drinks, and we're going to tell you about the timeshare. Like, then if you like it, you buy it, and same thing with this thing. Hey, we're going to take you to practice. We're going to give you lunch. We're going to give you some gear, and we're going to tell you about our collective. And if you like what we're doing, give us some money.
Yep. Yeah. That's pretty similar.
I think, I would like to see Nebraska do something like this.
That's not a bad idea. I think it would be I do think it would be popular.
Don't put a cap on it. See what you can get.
Yeah. They put a cap of 750.
Yeah. And
Ohio State put a cap of 750.
I wonder how hard that cap is.
I don't know.
But if it's during the week, it's one thing. But if you did it on like a Saturday or a Friday, you could probably get over 1,000, 1,500 people here for a practice.
I would think so.
$50 is a lot of money, though.
It is.
And they practice. Here's the other challenge. They practice on the grass.
Yeah.
So you'd have people all around the grass. Like, I don't think Matt Rhule is going to move on the turf field just for the hell of it.
I don't know. I wonder what Ohio State's thinking on that is. Those details weren't part of any of the stories I read. I don't know if I see, when I read it, my thought was, okay, they must be going to be practicing the stadium so that people can sit in the stands.
By the way, speaking of the turf field, did you hear that Channel 7 did a FOIA, and Nebraska softball and Trev Alberts, they were going to play a softball game.
There was discussions.
The wheels were moving
about playing a softball game in Memorial Stadium in 2025
against Washington.
Oh God, really? So I don't know what that
it's done. It's not happening.
I know it's not happening. The talks have ceased, according to KETV. It's a very interesting story. It's thought provoking. How would the field be configured? It's fascinating to me that they were even thinking about it. Would it draw like the volleyball Jordy Ball has a big draw that would.
I mean, yeah, would it look bad if only like 8,000 went?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. What's the threshold, though? I mean, I'd ask you this: would it look bad if 25,000 went? I mean, some people are inevitably going to say, "Well, they only got 25,000. Volleyball got 94." I don't know. Yeah, 92. I don't know what 92. I don't know what the threshold is for that.
Think about Nebraska volleyball, though. They outdrew what Caitlin Clark drew at Kinnick Stadium for her outdoor game.
It's remarkable.
I mean, Caitlin Clark is the hottest thing in this country right now. Hottest topic.
Sports topic.
Beyond sports. I mean, she's just talked about. She's a cultural topic.
Pretty big topic.
What's that?
The border's a pretty big topic.
I mean, but she's as big of a talking point as anything going on right now. And Nebraska volleyball drew a better crowd in their stadium by a wide margin than she drew. Now, granted, a little chillier when they played, but still.
God, you just said something fascinating. And I'm not saying you're wrong. You're right. Caitlin Clark is one of the biggest talking points in our country. I don't know what to say about that. That's a little weird to me.
What impresses me about her, though, is like she handles it all so well.
I don't know how.
Like,
you'd think there must be people in her life that help her maintain perspective.
I mean, she is just getting hammered and thrown on the ground and fouled, and no one's coming to her defense. And
there's people coming to her.
I mean, that girl from, was it Chicago?
Yeah,
threw her to the ground. Angel Reese didn't go to the. I mean, just the whole like. It's almost like they know what they're doing. Like they're creating like this like drama for the WNBA right now.
It's odd. Another news, Oklahoma won its 4th straight softball title, NCAA softball
without Jordine Ball.
Yeah, how about that? Oklahoma on a strangely remarkable run. 4 straight national titles. And
Patty Gaskell.
Yeah.
Is that her name? Gaskell?
I don't know, Sean.
I just threw you on the spot there.
Yeah, you did. But that thing you said about Caitlin Clark, I never really thought of it that way. But you're right. It's not just a sports talking point. That is it transcends sports. By the way, Hurley, considering the Lakers job, that becomes a huge talking point. Not like Caitlin Clark.
I don't do it if I'm him. Coaching the Jameses?
Yeah, we could go down a big rabbit hole. I've thought about this Hurley Lakers dalliance that's going on, and it is fascinating, and it's multi-layered. I mean, it's a very complex discussion when you get down to it. The one thing that's not complex and would be fascinating if he's doing it, I don't know. I would just shake his hand. Is he using one of the most iconic sports brands in the world for leverage? Is that what he's doing?
We already got a massive raise.
I know, but is he trying to get more money by using the Lakers? I mean, it's like using the Dallas Cowboys.
But his style, he's known to yell at fans in the stands after game.
Yeah, that's another layer.
I just don't see that working.
Are the Lakers going to put a 12-year deal in front of him that he just can't refuse?
The Hurleys, though, are perfect in the northeast part of the country.
They are. But now if you're a Hurley, you're such a basketball family. And now here's this chance to coach the Lakers. Do you turn that down? Here's this chance to coach LeBron. Do you turn that down? Some people turn it the other way and say, do you really want to deal with LeBron? The other side of that coin is, do you really want to deal with LeBron, maybe the best player ever? You might want to.
And his son, though, could be going there.
Yeah, I don't know about all that, but that doesn't make it enticing to me. That makes it less enticing. But you have this opportunity to coach LeBron. That's not necessarily a negative. It's complicated, but it's not necessarily a negative.
I don't know how we've done this, but we've gone from talking about Ohio State spring game tickets to Oklahoma softball,
to Hurley,
to Caitlin Clark, to Bobby or to Dan Hurley.
Yeah, Dan Hurley. I like
somehow our ADHD just destroyed this.
Just kicked in.
Headline.
We've said it. I think we've made reference to it, but I almost wouldn't want people to hear our phone calls because it would give them a headache.
But we get each other so well that it doesn't even faze us.
There's so much. Are we calling it ADHD, whatever it is? There's so much of it going on that it's almost remarkable.
We talk softball, women's basketball, Hurley family, Ohio State spring. All right.
On
that note, we got football camp tonight.
Yeah, I got to write a story beforehand, so get me out of here.
All right. Well, Again, thanks for joining us on Husker Online Headlines. For Steve Sipple, I'm Sean Callahan. We'll be back next week with a normal schedule of shows. Thanks for joining us here on Husker Online Headlines.